After 40 years, Daniel Richardson finally decided to speak for the first time. When Diana was with me, she wore no makeup, her hair was messy, but she was at her most beautiful. She wasn't Lady Spencer to me. She was just Diana. Laughing, playful, dreamy Diana. This confession opens an unknown chapter of Diana's youth. The small cafe in Norwich was quieter than usual on that rainy Tuesday afternoon in March 2020. Daniel Richardson sat by the window, his weathered hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. At 62, the lines around his eyes spoke of a life well lived. But there was something else there, a sadness that had never quite faded, a story that had remained untold for 4 decades. Daniel had been watching the morning news coverage about Princess Diana's legacy, the same coverage that appeared every year around significant anniversaries. But today felt different. Today, he couldn't bear to hear another expert analysis of a woman they had never truly known, not the way he had known her. The breaking point had come when a royal biographer on television claimed that Diana had never experienced real love before her marriage to Charles. Daniel had nearly thrown his remote at the screen. He knew better than anyone how wrong that statement was. He pulled out his mobile phone and, after much hesitation, dialed the number for the local BBC station. "Hello, I have a story about Princess Diana," he said quietly to the receptionist. "Something no one has ever heard before. Sir, we receive many calls about Princess Diana. What makes your story different?" Daniel's voice shook slightly. "Because I was her first love, and I have proof." 3 days later, Daniel found himself sitting across from journalist Rebecca Matthews in the same cafe. Rebecca had been intrigued by his call, especially when he mentioned having photographs and letters that no one had ever seen. She had done her research on Daniel Richardson, a retired music teacher, no criminal record, no history of seeking publicity. If he was lying, he was remarkably committed to the deception. "Mr. Richardson," Rebecca began, setting up her recording device, "you mentioned on the phone that you knew Princess Diana before she became famous. Can you tell me when and how you met her?" Daniel took a deep breath, his fingers absently tracing the rim of his teacup. "It was the summer of 1978. I was 20, studying music at the University of East Anglia. Diana was 17, just finished school. We met at a friend's party in Norfolk." He paused, a small smile crossing his face as the memories came flooding back. "She wasn't Lady Spencer that night. She was just this vibrant, laughing girl who had snuck out of her house to go to a party. She was wearing a simple yellow sundress, and her hair was in a ponytail. When she laughed, it lit up the entire room." Rebecca leaned forward, intrigued. "What was your first impression of her?" "Honestly, I thought she was the most genuine person I'd ever met. In my world, university students, musicians, artists, everyone was trying so hard to be sophisticated, to impress each other. But Diana was just there. She asked genuine questions, she listened to the answers, and she had this infectious enthusiasm for everything." Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small photograph, slightly faded but still clear. It showed a young Diana sitting on a blanket in a field. No makeup, hair tousled by the wind, beaming at the camera. "This was our 3rd date," Daniel explained. "I had borrowed my friend's camera. Diana hated having her picture taken usually, said she always looked awful in photos. But that day, she was so relaxed, so happy. She didn't even realize I was taking it until I said her name." Rebecca studied the photograph. The girl in the image bore little resemblance to the polished princess the world would later know. This Diana looked younger, freer, completely unguarded. "How long were you together?" Rebecca asked. 2 years, Daniel said, his voice growing quieter. "2 of the happiest years of my life, and I believe of hers too." But then Daniel revealed something that made Rebecca's pen stop moving across her notepad. "There's something else," Daniel said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Something I've never told anyone. Diana and we were engaged." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Engaged? But there's no record of that in any biography." Daniel reached into his jacket again and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple silver ring with a small emerald. Nothing elaborate, clearly purchased on a student's budget. "I proposed to her in September 1979, by the lake near her family's estate. She said yes." Daniel's voice was thick with emotion. "We were going to announce it after Christmas, once I'd finished my degree and could support her properly." "Why isn't this documented anywhere?" "Because," Daniel said, 3 weeks after she accepted, everything changed." He pulled out a small bundle of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. "She wrote to me almost every day when we were apart. These are just a few that I kept." Rebecca handled the letters carefully. The handwriting was unmistakably young, Diana's minus-rounded, enthusiastic, filling every inch of the page. "May I read one?" Rebecca asked. Daniel nodded. "That one on top is from August 1979. She was staying with relatives in Scotland." Rebecca read aloud, "My dearest Danny, I miss you terribly. The countryside here is beautiful, but all I can think about is our plans for when I return. I've been practicing that song you taught me on the piano, though I'm still hopeless at it. You're so patient with me. I can't wait to see your face again, to hear you laugh at my terrible jokes. The world feels empty when you're not in it. All my love, your future wife, Dee." Daniel's eyes glistened. She called me Danny. No one else ever called me that. And she wasn't terrible at piano. She was actually quite talented. She just didn't believe in herself. Rebecca was stunned by the casual reference to future wife in the letter. "This changes everything we thought we knew about Diana's romantic history." "There's more," Daniel said, pulling out another letter. This one was different. The handwriting was shakier, more urgent. "This is from October 1979, after she'd accepted my proposal." He read, "Danny, something terrible has happened. Father found out about us, about the ring. He's furious. He says I'm throwing away my future, that I don't understand what I'm giving up. He's threatened to cut me off completely if I continue seeing you. I don't know what to do. I love you so much it hurts, but I'm scared of losing my family. Please be patient with me while I figure this out." "What was your relationship like day to day?" Rebecca asked gently, still processing the revelation about the engagement. Daniel's face brightened, despite the heavy subject matter. "We were like any young couple, I suppose. We'd meet at the local cafe, go for long walks, attend concerts together. Diana loved music, not just listening to it, but understanding it. I was studying composition, and she'd sit for hours while I played new pieces, offering suggestions that were often better than what I'd originally written." He pulled out another photograph, this one showing Diana at a piano, completely absorbed in playing. She had this way of losing herself in music. All the expectations, all the pressure from her family about what she should be doing with her life, it all just melted away when she played. "What kind of pressure?" Rebecca asked. Daniel's expression grew more serious. Her family had very specific ideas about what was appropriate for a young woman of her background. They wanted her to marry well, to fulfill certain social obligations. Diana felt trapped by those expectations. With me, she could just be a teenager figuring out what she wanted from life. "But you proposed to her. You must have known her family would object." Daniel nodded sadly. "I was young and naive. I thought love would be enough. I thought if we showed them how happy we were together, they'd come around." "Did you know about her family's aristocratic background?" "Of course, but it didn't matter to me. I was a scholarship student from a working-class family in Cardiff. To me, Diana was just this amazing girl who made everything more interesting. She'd show up at my student flat with fish and chips, and we'd eat them sitting on the floor while I played guitar." Daniel showed Rebecca another photo. Diana sitting cross-legged on a worn carpet, laughing at something off camera, a paper bag of chips beside her. But there was something else in this photo that made Rebecca look twice. Diana was wearing the engagement ring. "She looks so carefree," Rebecca observed. "She was when she was with me. That's what I loved most about our relationship. I gave her permission to just be young, and she gave me a glimpse of a world I'd never imagined. Not because of her background, but because of her heart." "Can you tell me about some of your favorite memories together?" Daniel's smile returned, but there was pain behind it. "Now, there was this one time in the spring of 1979. Diana had convinced me to skip my morning lectures and drive to the coast with her. She'd packed this elaborate picnic, sandwiches, fruit, a thermos of tea. But when we got to the beach, it started pouring rain." He chuckled at the memory. "Most people would have been disappointed, but Diana just started laughing. She grabbed my hand and we ran along the beach in the rain, completely soaked. She said it was the most fun she'd had in months." Then Daniel's expression grew more serious. "That was also the day she first told me she loved me. We were sitting in my car, completely drenched, and she just said it. 'I love you, Danny.' Just like that. No drama, no grand gesture, just truth. She sounds like she had a wonderful sense of adventure." She did, but she also had this incredible empathy. "I remember once we were walking through Norwich city center, and we saw this elderly man who had fallen and dropped his shopping. While I was still processing what had happened, Diana was already there, helping him up, gathering his groceries, making sure he was all right. She spent 20 minutes with him, just talking, making him laugh. That was just who she was." Rebecca made notes as Daniel spoke. What did you talk about? What were her dreams at that time? She wanted to work with children, Daniel said without hesitation. Not in some honorary capacity, but really work with them. She talked about becoming a teacher, or maybe working with disadvantaged kids. She had this theory that children could sense when adults were being genuine versus when they were just going through the motions. That's remarkably similar to what she became known for later. Exactly, the Diana the world fell in love with. That compassionate, genuine person who connected with people. That was exactly who she was at 17. It wasn't an act or a calculated public persona. It was just Diana. Daniel pulled out one more letter, this one longer than the others. This is from December 1979. She was struggling with family pressure about her future. He read, "Danny, sometimes I feel like I'm living two different lives. When I'm with my family, I have to be this perfect version of myself that meets all their expectations. But when I'm with you, I can just be me, messy, confused, trying to figure everything out. I wish I could live in our world forever, where it doesn't matter what people think, where love is enough." The cafe had grown quieter around them as Daniel shared his memories. Rebecca could see how difficult this was for him, but also how important. "What happened, Daniel? Why did the relationship end? And what about the engagement?" Daniel's expression darkened, and Rebecca could see the pain that had never fully healed. Family pressure, as I mentioned. But it wasn't just disapproval. Diana's father, Earl Spencer, took drastic action. Daniel paused, clearly struggling with what to reveal next. In November 1979, I received a visit from two men in suits. They said they represented the Spencer family's interests. They offered me money, a substantial amount, to end the relationship and never contact Diana again. Rebecca's pen stopped moving. "They tried to pay you off? £20,000, Daniel said quietly. "That was more money than my family had ever seen, but I refused. I told them Diana and I were engaged, that we loved each other, and that no amount of money would change that." "How did they react?" Daniel's hands tightened around his teacup. "They weren't pleased. They made it clear that there were other ways to handle the situation. My scholarship could be revoked. My family could face financial difficulties. My future career prospects could be damaged. They never explicitly threatened me, but the message was clear." "Did you tell Diana about this?" "I tried to, but when I called her house, I was told she was unavailable. Her letters stopped coming. For 3 weeks, I heard nothing." Daniel pulled out another letter, this one shorter and written in Diana's hand, but with a different tone entirely. "Then I received this," he said, handing it to Rebecca. Rebecca read, "Daniel, I've been thinking about our situation, and I believe we need to be realistic about our future. My family has made me understand the responsibilities I have, and I don't think I can ask you to be part of a life that would be so different from what you're used to. I think it's best if we end our engagement and go our separate ways. I will always care for you, but this is the right decision. Diana." "It sounds so formal," Rebecca observed. "That's because she didn't write it," Daniel said bitterly. "At least, not alone. I knew Diana's voice, her way of expressing herself. This letter was dictated to her." "How can you be sure?" Daniel pulled out a final letter, this one handwritten on different paper and clearly written in secret. "Because 3 days later, I received this." Rebecca read the cramped handwriting. "Danny, please don't believe the letter I sent. They made me write it. Father has forbidden me from seeing you or contacting you. They're watching my mail, monitoring my phone calls. I'm being sent away to Switzerland for finishing school, but really to keep us apart. I love you and I always will. I'm sorry I'm not brave enough to fight them. Keep the ring. Maybe someday, D." Rebecca sat back, overwhelmed. "This is extraordinary. Diana was essentially held prisoner to prevent her from marrying you." "That's how it felt," Daniel said. "And that was the last I heard from her for months." "What did you do?" "I tried everything. I called the house repeatedly, but they said she wasn't available. I wrote letters that were returned unopened. I even traveled to the Spencer estate, but security wouldn't let me on the grounds." Daniel's voice grew heavy with regret. "I was young and didn't know how to fight a system that powerful. I didn't have the resources or connections to challenge them." "Did you ever see her again after 1980? "Yes," Daniel said. And this is perhaps the most shocking part of the story. Daniel took a sip of his cold tea, clearly preparing himself for a difficult revelation. "It was Christmas Eve, 1980. I was home in Cardiff for the holidays. I was walking through the city center when I saw her. Diana was there with a woman I didn't recognize shopping. She had returned from Switzerland? Apparently. When she saw me, she looked terrified. But then she did something that showed me the Diana I loved was still there." Daniel pulled out one final item, a small piece of paper with a time and address written in Diana's handwriting. She dropped this as she walked past me, an address and a time, midnight Christmas Eve, at a small church on the outskirts of Cardiff. She wanted to meet you. She wanted to say goodbye properly. We met that night in the empty church. She was different, more guarded, sadder. She told me that her family had made it clear that any contact with me would result in her complete disinheritance and social ruin. What did she say? Daniel's voice became very quiet. She said she would always love me, but that she had to live in the real world. She gave me back the engagement ring and told me to find someone who could love me without complications. How did you respond? I told her I understood, even though it was breaking my heart. We held each other for maybe 10 minutes and then she left. I never saw her again. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what Daniel had revealed. Daniel, why have you never told this story before? This would have been the story of the century. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Because it was ours, he said finally. The world fell in love with Princess Diana, but I had loved just Diana. That felt sacred somehow, too precious to share with strangers who would analyze it and judge it and turn it into something it wasn't. What changed your mind? Watching all these documentaries, reading all these books about her, listening to people who never knew her personally talk about what she was really like. They get so much wrong. They talk about her as if she was this tragic figure, this victim of circumstance. Daniel's voice grew stronger. But the Diana I knew wasn't tragic. She was joyful, funny, optimistic. She believed in love, in kindness, in the possibility that people could be better than they often were. I wanted the world to know that part of her existed, that it was real, not just a public persona. What do you want people to understand about her? That she was exactly who she appeared to be. All that warmth, that genuine care for others, that ability to make people feel seen and valued, that wasn't an act, that was just Diana. Daniel gathered up the photographs and letters, handling them with obvious care. I kept these not because I was clinging to the past, but because they represent something beautiful. A time when love was simple, when two young people could just enjoy being together without any agenda beyond making each other happy. Do you have any regrets? About not fighting harder? Every day. But I also understand that Diana made the choice she thought was best for her future. She went on to do remarkable things with her life, to touch millions of people. If she had married me, she would have been just another music teacher's wife. As their interview concluded, Rebecca asked one final question. If you could say something to Diana now, what would it be? Daniel smiled, and for a moment Rebecca could see the young man who had fallen in love with a teenage Diana Spencer 4 decades earlier. I'd tell her that she was right. Love really can be easy and joyful and accepting. I'd thank her for teaching me that, and I'd tell her that every good thing I've experienced in my life since has been touched by the joy she brought into it. After Rebecca left, Daniel sat alone in the cafe for a long time, watching the rain streak down the windows. For 40 years he had carried these memories privately, but sharing them felt like finally giving Diana the tribute she deserved, not to the princess, but to the girl who had shown him what love could be when it was pure and uncomplicated. That evening, Daniel returned to his small flat and carefully put away the photographs and letters. Tomorrow the world would know about his Diana, the laughing, dreaming, loving girl who had existed long before she became an icon. And perhaps, in some small way, that girl would finally be remembered, not for how she died, but for how beautifully she had lived. The story would run the following week, touching millions of people who had thought they knew everything about Princess Diana. But Daniel's memories revealed something more precious than any official biography could, proof that behind the fairy tale and the tragedy was a real person who had loved and been loved completely, if only for a brief, shining moment in time.